Hello beautiful people, welcome back to my channel. So today we are going to be making this beautiful pinafore skirt that you are seeing on the screen. So this is absolutely beautiful, and if you want to achieve this you need at least 2 yards of fabric. So if this look like what you're interested in, definitely watch till the end. I have a piece of pattern paper here, and I've also gone ahead to draw out my body lines, which is my waistline, the hip line, and the length. Okay, so the hip line I'm using for this is 8 inches. The waist to hip line I'm using here is 8 inches. Yours might be 9 inches or 7 inches, depending on how tall or how short you are. Okay, so the first thing I'm going to go ahead to do now is to take my waist measurement. But before then, if you are very curvy, I will always advise you use that for your skirt. But because the person I'm making this for is not curvy, is not very curvy, so I'm not going to be putting any that here. Tell me if it works for you, if you put that on your skirt or if you don't, because personally all my skirts I don't put that in it. So I'm going to show you how to put that in your skirt in case you need to put that in yours. Okay, so what I'm going to do now is I'm going to take the half of my nipple to nipple measurement. So the nipple to nipple measurement here is 7 inches. So I'm going to be using 3.5 as the half of the nipple to nipple measurement. So I'm going to be marking 3.5 from the center of the front here. This is our center front. So let me label this the CF. So I'm going to be using 3.5 to mark out my dart leg here. Okay, so this is my dart leg. I'm also going to take that same measurement down a little bit below 3.5 inches. So now when I've gotten here from the center to 3.5 inches, what I'm going to do is I'm going to come up from the hip line by 3 inches. Okay, that is where my dart is going to stop. Then I'm going to use a straight line to connect from my waist to the 3 inches that I came up from the hip line by. Alright, so this is my dart. The next thing I'm going to do is to go in and out of this dart line here by 0.5 inches, and that is going to be my dart. Okay, so when I've gotten this, I'm going to go ahead and connect to this point. Okay, so this is what my dart is going to look like, assuming I'm going to be using a dart. Okay, that is what my dart is going to look like. So having gotten this, next thing you want to do is to take your waist measurement. So the waist I'm working with here is 26 inches, so you're going to divide it by 4. Okay, you're going to divide 26 inches by 4, and whatever you have, you're going to impute it here. Alright, then if you are putting that for your skirts, you're going to replace your dart here. But because I'm not going to be using a dart, I'm going to be leaving it at this. Okay, our waist measurement divided by 4, this is what we have. Alright, then you go ahead and replace your dart. So on the hip line, I'm going to divide my hip measurement by 4 as well, and whatever I have, I'm going to go ahead and mark out. Okay, so on the full length of this top, what I'm going to do is I'm going to minus 2 or 3 inches from what I have on my hip line. Okay, so what I have here is 8.5. I'm going to be using 7 inches for the waistline, for the full length of the skirt. Okay, so having gotten this, I'm going to go ahead and connect. Right, so this is what I have as the front of the skirt. Okay, so this is what I have. I'm going to go ahead and cut out, but remember that you are supposed to replace your dart if you are very curvy, or even if you're not very curvy. If you want to put your dart, just go ahead and replace whatever we took out from the dart. Okay, so the next thing I'm going to do before I cut out is to cut out the band. All right, so from here I'm going to be using a 2 inches band. So I'm going to measure 2 inches from the waist of this skirt, 2 inches down like this. Okay, then I'm going to connect. All right, so let me quickly use my marker to trace out the lines. So this is what we have. This is going to be the band. This is going to be the band for the skirt. So I'm going to go ahead now and cut out. So this is what I have. This is what I have here. This is the band and this is the actual skirt bodies. Okay, so I'm going to be using this particular pattern now to cut both the front and the back, because the only difference between the front and the back in this case is going to be the zip allowance. Okay, so assuming you added a dart, this is the dart now. Assuming we added the dart back, what I'm going to do to cut this band is I'm going to fold out this dart. I'm going to fold it out so that we have one piece for the band. We will not be having a band that will be having a dart in it, right? So I'll just fold it out like this, then use it and cut out a one piece band. But because we're not using the dart, I'm just going to leave the band like this. Okay, so I'm going to go ahead now and transfer to my actual fabric. That's on our actual fabric. What I simply did was to place my fabric on fold, then I placed my pattern on top of the fabric. Okay, so remember we did not add any stitching allowance on the pattern when we were making it. So I went ahead to add a 1.5 inches stitching allowance to this. Okay, so that we can use 1/2 inch to turn the lining and the remaining 1 inch for the shaping. That's what that's in. So I also went ahead to add 1.5 inches on the down part for the folding allowance. Okay, so I'm going to go ahead now and cut out. So this is what we have. I went ahead to notch here, so I know that this is where the folding for this starts. Okay, so the next thing I'm going to go ahead to do now is to cut the slit, because remember we have a slit at the front of this skirt. Okay, and this is the front part. So I'm going to go ahead now and notch the center so we know where the center starts, where we're going to start working on the slit. And if you look very closely to the picture, you're going to find out that the slit is at the side. Okay, so you have to determine if you want the slit to be at the left or the right of the leg. Okay, and from there just going to measure 3 inches or 4 inches depending on how wide your skirt is. If your skirt is very wide, you can go in by 4 inches, by 5 inches, by 3 inches, by 2 inches, depending on the size of your skirt. So I'm going to be using 3 inches for this. Okay, I'm going to be using 3 inches, and then I'm going to measure. I measured this on the body, and what I got was 15 inches for the slit. Okay, from the waist part. So I'm going to measure 15 inches like this. Okay, and then I'm going to connect the line here because I'm going to be cutting it open from here to here. Okay, so this is just how I'll get the slit. The back and front is actually going to be the exact same thing. The only difference is going to be the slit that is at the front alone, because we will not be having a zipper at the back of this skirt, but we'll be having a zipper at the side because of the style we're making. Remember, it has a pinafore on top. Okay, so I'm going to be cutting the exact same thing I did for the front. The only difference will be that I'm not going to be slitting the back just like we did for the front. So I'm going to go ahead and trace out this front. We'll have for the front and the back. This part with the slit is the front and this part is the back. Okay, so having gotten this, if you want to be lining yours, can go ahead and cut lining for yours. Okay, so I'm going to go ahead now and cut lining off camera, and then we'll start sewing. Pinafore on the upper part, we are going to be using this piece of pattern paper to draft it out first. Okay, and then here is our shoulder. This is going to be our shoulder line. I'm label this the shoulder, and then the length we are working with is 15 inches, which is the half length. Okay, so this is 15 inches. I'm going to also draw a straight line across. All right, so you already know that this is not your average top. It's not going to be having a dart. It's not even going to be having a side, just up in the front and then in the back. Okay, so I'm going to be working with 3 inches as my neck width, which is the basic neck width. Actually, this is 3 inches, and then I'm going to be using 7 inches for the width of the neck. This is for the front. Okay, this is for the front. We are going to be using this same pattern paper for the front and back, so I'm going to end up cutting the back out on this pattern. All right, so when we have gotten this is the width of the neck, and this is the depth of the back of the neck, and this is the front. So I'm going to go ahead and connect the neck of the front, because we're going to be having a V-neck for the front. Okay, this is the neck for the front. Then we are going to connect the neck for the back. Okay, so this is the neck for the back, and this is the neckline for the front. Okay, so having gotten this, I'm going to go in by the shoulder measurements, and the shoulder I'm going to be using here is not the actual shoulder. We are going to be using our nipple to nipple measurement divided by 2. Okay, at this point I'm using 3.5 as the half of the nipple measurement, so I'm going to be using 8.5 inches for the neckline for the shoulder. Okay, we are going to be dividing 8.5 inches. I'm going to be dividing 8.5 inches into 2, and then that is what I'm going to be using for the shoulder measurement. Okay, and on that point I'm going to be coming down by 1 inch. Okay, so we get our shoulder slope. Then I'm going to connect like so. Okay, so this is what we have. Then from there, on the bust point, I'm going to be using 3.5, which is the actual nipple to nipple measurement, and I'm going to be adding 0.5 inch to it. Okay, then on the down part I'm going to be using 3 inches. All right, so this is what I have. You can actually alter all these measurements depending on the measurements you are using, because depending on how big the person you are making this for is. Okay, so this is what we have. This is what we have as the pinafore of this style. Okay, so we are going to be cutting the back neckline. Then when we are cutting on our actual fabric, we are going to cut the back and the front now. All right, we are going to be using just this pattern paper to cut both the front and the back. So I'm going to go ahead now and cut out. Right, so this is what we have as the pinafore. This is the back neckline. After cutting out the back parts, we are going to go ahead and cut out the front. Now, actual fabric, what I did was folded my fabric into 2, and then I placed this. I'm going to be cutting the back first, so I'm going to be adding 0.5 inches all around for the stitching allowance. Okay, and I'm going to go ahead now and cut out. So for the front as well, I went ahead to cut out the neckline for the front, and I'm going to be adding 0.5 inches all around as well. Right, so this is what we have for the front, and then this is what we have for the back. Okay, so we are going to go ahead and also cut out lining for this piece as well. So here I went ahead to cut out the lining and also interface it, which is optional. If you want to use lining, you can go ahead and cut lining. If you also want to interface the lining, go ahead and do your interfacing. So the next thing I'm going to do is to start turning the fabric with the lining. Okay, so I'm going to place the fabric and the lining right side facing each other like this, as you can see. And then if you look here, you're going to see that the fabric is longer than the lining a bit. So I'm going to shift it down and make it equal at the down. So after turning the down, I can then shift everything up and sew. Okay, so the first thing I'm going to do here is to pin the down part, because I'm going to be sewing with 0.5 inches. Okay, so I'm going to go ahead and use 0.5 inches to sew the down. All right, don't worry that we do not slit the lining for the down, we do not slit the lining for the front. I'm going to show you how we are going to do that later. Okay, so I'm going to go ahead and sew here. After sewing the down part, I'm going to turn it up like this till I get to the notching that we'll have. Okay, like this, and then I'll go ahead and sew. All right, I'm going to turn the front and the back for the down part that same way, and then for the upper part I'm going to turn it all around, leaving leaving just the down part. I'm also going to turn the shoulder as well. Okay, so I'm going to use something very tiny to turn all around like this. Okay, I'm going to turn all around like this. When I was cutting, I also added a sewing allowance, 0.5 inches sewing allowance to the shoulder. Please endeavor you don't forget to add 0.5 inches sewing allowance, so that you're going to use it to turn the shoulder, because the shoulder is going to be having a button. Okay, that is the way we are going to sew it. So I'm going to turn the neck, the shoulder, and the two sides, leaving just the down part that we're going to be attaching to the skirt. I'm going to do the exact same thing for the front as well. So let me go ahead now and turn the linings. So to sew the slits at the front, this is what I have. I went ahead to sew the down part and also draw it up, as you can see, to sew the side. So we are only left with the slits at the front. So while I'm sewing, I went ahead to add my hemming gum, so that once I go ahead to iron, I'm just going to quickly iron. All right, so what I'm going to do now is I'm going to sew here. From here I'm going to sew to this point, then start from here also and sew here. All right, so after sewing, I'm going to go ahead and use my scissors now to tear, so that when we turn it to the other side, we are going to have a perfectly aligning slit. Okay, so I'm going to go ahead now to my sewing machine and sew. I'll sew from here up to this point and then sew down to this point. And while you're sewing, make sure you are arranging it very properly, so that it is not going to be twisted after you are done sewing. So I'm going to go over to my sewing machine now and sew that. Moving on, this is what we have. Can you see how perfect this is? This is how neat this appears. Okay, so this is what we have. I'm going to go ahead now and press. All right, I also went ahead to turn the upper part. This is what I have for the front. I went ahead to notch here. That is why you see it relaxed like this. And for the back, I'm also going to go ahead and notch the neckline and then turn. So I'm going to go ahead now and press all this. And when we are back, we're going to go on from there. So moving on to the band, I went ahead to fold my piece of fabric into 4. I folded into 2 like this, then I folded again into 2 like this. This is because I want to be cutting the front and the back the same. Okay, and we are going to be it's going to be different because we are going to be placing the pinafore inside. All right, so I'm going to be cutting it differently. All right, so here I'm going to be adding 0.5 inches on the top and on the bottom, and then I'll add 1.5 inches on the side for the shaping. So this is what I have. All right, so I'm going to be cutting another 2 pieces like this, so that I'll be using them for the lining of both the front and the back. Okay, so let me go ahead now and cut. I'm going to cut another one just like this, and then I'm going to interface it. So if you also want to interface yours, go ahead and interface it. Moving on, here is the band that I have just prepared. I told you before, I went ahead to interface. So after interfacing, I went ahead to fold in into 2 and get the midpoint. Okay, so bringing in the upper part of this project, I also went ahead to notch the center. So what I'm going to do now, watch closely, I'm going to place the center like this, making sure that the 2 notches are corresponding. This is why we cut this band out into 2. Okay, and then I'm going to place this one, also making sure that the notch is in corresponding. Then I'm going to pin it together like this. All right, so we are going to go over to our sewing machine, and then we are going to sew. All right, we're going to turn the side, we're going to turn here, we're going to turn the upper part, so that when we open it up, this is what we are going to have. Okay, so I'm going to go ahead and do the exact same thing for the back as well. I also found out the midpoint, place the midpoint together, making sure they are aligning, then also place this one on top. All right, then pin it down. So I'll go over to my sewing machine now and turn all around from the shaping side to the upper part and then the down. We're just going to leave this side so that we are going to turn it out from closely. You're also going to find out that it's the upper part of the band that we are sewing and not the lower part. This part is the part we are going to be attaching to the main fabric. So this part is the waist. So I'm going to go ahead now and sew up. What I'm going to do now is to join this piece. Okay, this is what it looks like after I was done joining and ironing. Can you see what it looks like? So neat. So I'm going to go ahead now and join this piece. So I notch the center of this band and also the midpoint of this place. Okay, and I'm going to make sure the midpoint align. Then I'm going to go over to my sewing machine and join. All right, so this is what I have. I'm going to go over to my sewing machine now and join, and then this part is ready. After joining, I'm going to go ahead and shape. Okay, after joining, the only thing remaining is shaping and also putting our zipper. So I'm going to go ahead now, join the two sides, shape, and then put our zipper, and the skirt is ready. All right, so when we put our zipper, we're also going to prepare the bow tie. There's a bow tie here. I'm going to show you guys how to go about the bow tie and how to attach it, and then we're done. So let me quickly go and shape so we can get to the bow tie part. I had to cut out a piece of fabric here, and this fabric is measured 16 inches for the length and the width. 16 inches for the width, and the length is 10 inches. So I have 11 inches here. So this depends on how large you want it to be. If you want it to be very large, you can go ahead and make it larger than this. Okay, so I'm going to fold it into two. You can also go ahead and interface this if you want, but I'm not going to be interfacing mine. Okay, so I'm going to fold it into two like this, and then I'm going to sew all the corners with 0.5 inches. So after sewing it, I'm going to open one part a little bit and then turn it from that part and press it. Okay, so after doing that, we are going to come back and continue. I'm going to show you guys how to fold this into your bow and attach it to your skirt. So this is what we have once we are done. I opened here a bit as you can see, and I turned it from there. All right, this is what we have. So what I'm going to go ahead to do now is to prepare the bow, and this is how I'm going to be folding the bow. Okay, I folded it like this, then folded it to the other side, opposite side. Okay, can you see? Okay, so this is what we have. Then if you hold this at the center, this is what it's going to look like. All right, so I'm going to go ahead now and attach this here. Okay, I'm going to be attaching this here, and then I'm going to use a tiny rope to tie it in place. Something like this. I'm going to use something like this to tie it in place so that it doesn't move. Okay, so now this is what we have. This is what we have. Okay, so I'm going to go ahead and place it here. I'm going to go ahead and place it here, then I will attach it here and attach it here. All right, so when we are done, this is what we have. All right, so if you are still watching till now, thank you very much for watching. So here I'm going to end up putting my buttonhole here on this side of the back. I'll put my buttonhole here, and my button will be here. Okay, so when I button it, this is what it's going to look like. Okay, and that will be all. So this is what it looks like after we are done. So at this point, if you're yet to subscribe, so consider subscribing, and also give this video a thumbs up, and I will see you guys again on the next one. Bye.